Good morning. We got the biggest room. How about that? My name is Eli Moore with the Haas Institute for a Fair and Inclusive Society. Welcome to Curricula and Pedagogy for Belonging. Feel free to, all right, people are excited. I'm excited. I'm here with some of my heroes and really excited about their work and to be able to collaborate and lift up their work. If you want to move towards the front, we're gonna be in a large group for about half the time, and then we're gonna break into 4 small groups for discussion and facilitating some of the work in the curriculum that you'll be hearing about. So this is really set up, we set up this session as a way to try to offer some of the work that we feel like can be a resource and a tool for taking some of the concepts, frameworks, strategies that you're hearing about in the conference and creating spaces and facilitating discussion and strategy with community that connects with their experience, that begins with, where people are at, and isn't just a process of kind of sharing out or delivering, but really is a process of building together. So you're going to hear about 4 different projects or curricula today. What we'll do is we'll have about 10 minutes on each of these different curricula. So first, you'll hear about the Blueprint for Belonging curricula, which is a set of workshop modules that the Haas Institute, CHIRLA, ACE, the National Equity Project, and others have developed and been trying out and refining that seeks to ultimately try to shift the dominant narrative. And so it tries to work at the value of, at the level of values and vision and our structural analysis. Then you'll hear about Propigate, Pollinate, and Practice, which is a curricula that movement generation uses to work around the framework of just transition. And then you'll hear about the curricula Teaching for Black Lives, which Rethinking Schools has put out, which is a bunch of different educators who have pulled together teaching tools based on their experience on themes related to Black liberation and Black anti-racist work. And finally, you'll hear from Mahia Lopez about the work that she's doing in Cuba, anti-racist cultural strategy work in the schools and the Club del Esperando. And she'll be speaking in Spanish, and we'll have translation. So with that, I'm going to pass it off to Polo Morales from CHIRLA, who's going to give you a bit of a taste of the Blueprint for Belonging curriculum.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Apolonio, or Polo Morales. I'm the political director with the Coalition for Humane Immigrant Rights. And I'm going to just walk through a very simple exercise. And this is, it's a 2-step process. One is pair up with somebody next to you, and then that's first step. Second step is going to be what you discussed. You're going to present to 2 other people. So you're going to have a group of 2, step 1, and a group of 4, step 2. Is anybody confused? I know I've only had 1 cup of coffee today. I'm confusing myself. Okay, good. All right, so the question that we want to pose, just in terms of building a shared identity across differences, is what we have to do in order to understand one another. And I found that as we present this question, some folks have a very easy response to it. Other folks have to think about it. So we're giving you a very small amount of time to really think about it if you need that time, but some other folks are going to jump right on it. So we'll see how that turns out in your groups. But in pairs, so look at someone next to you and all right. If you know them well, good. If you don't, even better. So first question, step 1, first question. Everybody have a pair? Okay, you need to Now answer this fill in the blank. I am. All right, we got everybody here? Everybody following on? Good. Raise your fist. Cool. All right. All right. So, I am, you fill in the blank. My people are blank. Okay, so take a few minutes to do that. Give each other maybe 1 or 2 minutes to kind of frame that, and then let the other person speak. And that's step 1, and then I'll tell you when to switch, and then we'll get into step 2. Are we clear? All right, so I am, fill in the blank. My people are, fill in the blank. Go. Okay, in about 10 seconds, let the other person talk. Don't do all the talking. You got to listen too. So, switch. About 30 more seconds to start wrapping this up. Get down to the 10-second wire here. All right, let's bring it back. So we were told that we cannot be seen way in the back, and for a belonging conference, that's just not going to fly, so we're going to stand up as we speak. Is this better? Okay, raise your fist, come back. Excellent. All right. All those years of teaching really helps out here. And as an organizer. Okay, so step 2. Find 2 other people from your group. You have your 2 folks. Find 2 other folks and just share the statement right back out. Minute, kind of shorten it out. All right. And take about 2 minutes to do that. Switch. Did everybody get a chance to share? No? Okay. Move on to the next person. About 30 more seconds, folks. 30 more seconds. All right, folks, let's bring it back. If you didn't get a chance to share, there's plenty of time during lunch. All right, raise your fist again one more time. All right, are we back? Are we back? Oh, reluctant fists. Okay. Bring it back, folks. Bring it back. We want to make sure that we have a lot to go through today, so we want to make sure we get to that. So, we have just gone through the process of what exactly, right? That's a big question. So one is really coming up to a very short conclusion about who I am, right, as a self, as a person, right? And then sharing that and that sense of identity with somebody else. And then together, once we shared with someone else, I am, my people are, we then transition into a little bit of a bigger we. And that bigger we transformed when you shared with two other folks, right, into a collective we. Now, there's a lot of we's in here, and the goal would be to have everybody, and this is too big to do this, but to have everybody understand that concept of we. So we're all here right now at this moment in time. We have shared history, shared culture, some things that we didn't even know about one another, and that's bringing us one step closer to understanding each other's humanity. So, again, we go from the individual to the collective we. We want to make sure that folks understand that this is a process, right? We would have more time, and this is part of the curriculum. It was a good icebreaker. I'm going to hand it over to Eli really quick, and then we're going to get into more process in terms of the agenda for today. Here.
So that's one of the, can y'all hear me? That's one of the activities from the workshop on bridging and building a bigger we. And just to say one thing about the curriculum, these are works in progress always, and we understand that in any given context, you're gonna have to adapt these different tools. You're gonna add in your own flavors, add in your own stories. We're also hoping that that as folks take these tools and adapt them and learn from it, you can share out what you're doing. And so one of the things we'd like to get out of this is a sense of people's interest in being in communication as you adapt and use the tools and develop new resources with them. These are the 6 different workshop modules in the Blueprint for Belonging. So there's a piece on belonging and the framework of belonging that uses the video on the circle of human concern that talks about othering and then gets into the way that corporate power and public and private space have been shaped by the process of othering and have in turn shaped othering. There's a piece on Introduction to Strategic Narrative, which is the kind of framework that we use for thinking about how do we move beyond just talking about issues in single policies or single communities to having a long-term vision that really gets at a transformational story about society, how we got where we are and where we're trying to go. And then there's a piece on Organizing for Transformation, which centers a video on the California story that Manuel Pastor was talking about, and the way that multiracial, base building, electoral integrated strategies shifted California from where it was in the 90s to now, and kind of uses that as a way to think about transformational organizing in other contexts. Their piece on individualism just talks about how individualism has become a part of our culture, has become really a dominant value, and how that influences our work. Uses storytelling and a bunch of different activities. Extractive finance gets at financialization, or what we call extractive finance, and the way that impacts people's daily lives, whether it's in food or employment or housing, because it's been such a powerful process, but also such a kind of complicated and removed structural force in people's lives. And then finally is the piece on bridging and building a bigger we, which you heard about from Polo. So those are all 6 of those modules are on the Haas Institute website, and that's what we'll be digging into a little bit more in the breakout group on the Blueprint for Belonging project. So I'll pass it over to Michelle from Movement Generation.
Cool, so kind of on behalf of the facilitators up here, can y'all hear me okay? Okay. We wanted to just give each other a chance to see who's in the room. So real quick, if you could stand up if you are an educator who works in schools. Great. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. Right on. And then stand up if you facilitate workshops in community settings, so not schools. Great. Thank you also. Yeah, right. Thank you. Stand up if you work with adults. Okay, yeah, right. Okay, and then stand up if you work with kids, youth, or young adults. Yeah. Okay. Great. Or sorry, I should also say, or put your hand in the air if that is more accessible for you. Stand up if you're an artist or you create cultural work. Right on. Key way to do this work. And then stand up if you believe that Black, Brown, Indigenous, and poor communities are in crisis. Right. And lastly, stand up if you believe that the life support systems of the planet are also in crisis. Right. Thank you. And now, yeah, sit down if you're ready to do something about it. I'm going to pass it over to my compañero Mateo Nube, also from Movement Generation.
Buenos días, familia. It's beautiful to be here. Thank you all for the effort that it took to be here, and thank you to all the folks who are holding up your responsibilities back home if it took you some effort to get here. As Michelle said, I am Mateo Nube from Movement Generation. I'm here with both Michelle and my colleague Sammy. And as Eli lined up for you all, we're giving you kind of a 5-minute glimpse of what our curriculum is about as a taster. So Movement Generation, we came to be out of a recognition that there's a political necessity to respond to the call that the great Grace Lee Boggs, organizer and mentor and leader from Detroit, asked us all to step to, which is to really understand the time on the clock of the world that we happen to be alive in. And as Michelle just alluded, the life support systems of our planet are in crisis, so figuring out how to get in right relationship with each other and the natural world is a political imperative for all of our communities. So our curriculum really centers on this question of, if we are living in a moment in time where transition is now inevitable, but justice is not, how do we make this transition a just transition? So we have two pieces of curricular support for you all. One is Propigate, Pollinate, Practice, and we'll let you know how you can access this online. And we have a second one, which is a strategic framework for a just transition called From Banks and Tanks to Cooperation and Caring. This is also online, but we have hard copies for you all. So what I'm going to share is just a really quick glimpse at our worldview, if you will, that will then set the stage for what will be a very interactive engagement we'll do with those of you who come to our 30-minute workshop. So we really like, we find it very useful to get etymological. If what we are doing is struggling to get into right relationship with home, it's actually really useful to appreciate that the root of multiple important words in our political conversations, eco, literally means home. It comes from what we in English phonetically would pronounce oikos, but it's phonetically actually said eco in Greek, which means home. And it's useful to start here because if we then look at a word like ecology, we actually appreciate that ecology literally means the logic of home, the knowledge of home. And what I've found very useful to appreciate is that as someone who grew up in a city, I was made intentionally illiterate about how home works. I did not grow up understanding how my watershed functions, what my food shed is, what my energy shed is. The point being here is that a key part of our struggle to reclaim right relationship with home, is to understand how home works. So a core part of our curriculum is just about that. Secondly, then, it's useful to then appreciate that if eco means home, ecosystems literally means the relationships in a home. It's not about the individual parts. One of the control mythologies of dominant society is to tell us that the smallest unit of study is individual. There's no such thing as living as an individual. Without relationships, we wilt and die very quickly. So ecosystems are about the relationships in a home. And it gets us then to, I think, one of the juiciest terms here, which is economy. The etymology of economy, it literally means the management of home. There's no such thing as the economy. There are multiple ways of organizing management of home. We can manage it very wisely. We can manage it poorly. And one way to sum up where we are at today is that mismanagement of home has been globalized. So what does it look like for us to move from an extractive economy, this globalization of mismanagement, and return to local, living, loving, linked economies? So that's a glimpse of, again, both how we frame a lot of the front end of our workshops to create a shared language that we all can relate to, and home is something that we all can relate to. And we, in our 30-minute session, will do an interactive piece called The Web of Life. And I think I'll press pause there. Cool. Gracias.
Hi, can you hear me? No? Hi, is this better? Yeah. Okay. So my name is Jody Sokolauer. I currently coordinate the Teach Palestine project at the Middle East Children's Alliance. Before that, for about a decade, I was the managing editor of Rethinking Schools. And in terms of, and that's the position in which I help with a lot of the materials that are in the book I'm going to be talking about today, which is Teaching for Black Lives. Rethinking Schools is a publisher and advocacy organization that's focused on bringing social justice issues into K-12 curriculum. And all the articles are by and for K-12 teachers, teacher educators, and teacher activists. So before I was working at Rethinking Schools, I taught social studies at Berkeley High, just up the street here. And one year, I was teaching a 9th and 10th grade world history class. We just finished a unit on the French Revolution and the Haitian Revolution, and I was introducing what we were going to be doing about the Industrial Revolution. And Tiffany, who was one of the black students in my class, raised her hand, interrupted me, and said, "It's almost the end of February. We haven't done anything about black history." I said, "We just finished talking about Haiti. Doesn't that count?" And she's like, "No, this class is racist." And a bunch of other kids in the class are, "Yeah, this class is racist." So this is the kind of situation that like brings terror to the gut of a white teacher, you know, and so one part of me wanted to like start explaining how all the things I had done in the curriculum to make it more inclusive and diverse, but I knew that something really important was happening there. So I took a deep breath and I said, "Okay, tomorrow I'll bring in a few different ideas and we'll talk about what you want to do." And the next day in both world history classes, we had the best, most engaged conversation we'd had all year. My classes at that point were pretty diverse, about a third African American, a third Latinx, a third white and Asian, and everybody participated. You know, so one girl, Emily, who was white, said, you know, every year we learn the same stuff about Rosa Parks and Martin Luther King over and over again, and nothing else. And Rochelle, who was African American, said, "I don't want to learn about slavery anymore. Every time we learn about black people, it's just about us being victims, and it makes me feel terrible." And in the end, they decided, I had these 3 different ideas, and my only requirement was that both classes had to pick the same idea. And what they decided they wanted to do was look at the history of Africa between about 1880 and World War I from an Afrocentric perspective, because they all said that Africa was what they knew the least about. And so we spent about a month. We read part of a book by an African-American journalist about the time she spent in Africa, and then we compared Afrocentric perspectives on that history with what was in their history book. And it was the most engaged, best unit we'd had all year. Everybody participated. There was a lot of critical thinking. The work they did was wonderful. And from that experience, I drew some critical lessons that are kind of what undergird this book. So one is, students need teachers who are actively anti-racist, conscious, transparent with their students about their own relationship to black history and black struggle. Students need to be involved in deciding what they need to learn and how they want to learn it. Students need content that accurately portrays the resistance and resilience of black people in the US. And students need content that's rooted in an understanding of intersectionality and internationalism. So last year, the first National Black Lives Matter at School Week of Action had 3 demands, which I think are also really important to add to what I learned from that experience in my class. End zero tolerance discipline, implement restorative justice, hire, support, and retain more black teachers, mandate black history and ethnic studies in curriculum from K through 12. I would say K through 16, yeah. So this book has like essays and interviews and lots of models of teaching about black issues and black history, K-12. It's got a whole section on teaching about mass incarceration and the school-to-prison pipeline. It's got a whole section on gentrification and displacement. And I had a hard time picking what unit, what lesson I would do with you all in the section later. And I finally chose an activity that explores the history of Muslims in the United States, specifically Muslims of African descent, from their role leading rebellions against slavery to the present day. Racism fuels ignorance of both black history and Muslim history, And Islamophobia, unlike what most of the tolerance-based activities that happen in school, does not originate primarily in a lack of knowledge about Islam as a religion. Like racism, it's a consequence of white supremacy. So I think the intersectionality of this lesson raises a lot of questions and critical thinking for middle and high school students and also for people who work with adults. So that's it. Thanks.
Ok, buenos días. Me voy a parar y me voy a sentar para estar más cerca de mis notas.
If it's okay with you, I'd like to sit down so I can be closer to my notes. Can you hear the translation mic okay? Okay.
Sí. Ok. Primero que todo, me gustaría ganar unos minutos para agradecer mucho el hecho de que 2 cubanos estemos aquí perteneciendo. Porque para nosotros no es fácil llegar a los Estados Unidos por la situación política que hay entre nuestros 2 países.
I'd first just like to take one moment to celebrate the fact that there are 2 Cubans attending this conference because the geopolitical situation makes it very difficult for us to travel to the United States.
Bueno, agradecer a la plataforma cubana y también a los organizadores de este hermoso evento.
So we'd like to thank both the Cuba platform and the organizers from this beautiful gathering for making that possible.
Luego me gustaría agradecer especialmente también a esta persona que está aquí al lado nuestro, porque no es nuestra traductora, es nuestra amiga que también nos ha acompañado por mucho tiempo y está aquí para acompañarnos y que podamos entender muchas de las cosas que se ha desarrollado aquí y nosotros poder también compartir lo que queremos compartir con ustedes, ¿no?
She's also thanking the translation for making it possible to understand what's happening.
Ok. Bueno, a mí me gustaría partir de qué es el Club del Espendrú. Quizás Zurbano ayer habló un poquito sobre eso y de quiénes somos.
So I'm here today to talk to you about our project, which is called El Club del Espendrú. It's the Afro Club. If you were in Roberto Zurbano's breakout session yesterday, you heard about it as well.
Somos un proyecto de vindicación social que adquiere mayor dimensión en el 2016 cuando ocurre un cambio económico en Cuba, ¿sí?
We are a social justice project, and we took on a much larger role in 2016 when a number of economic changes started to happen.
Y eso nos hace repensar y también volver un poquito a ver el activismo que estábamos haciendo, cómo cambiábamos eso para continuar.
And it opened the door for us. It gave us a moment to start to look together at the kind of activism that we were doing and think about how we might want to adjust moving forward.
Entonces nos reunimos un grupo de amigos, activistas, artistas. Ahí está Roberto Zurbano que habló ayer, que pensamos la idea de cómo movernos en esa situación tan difícil.
So a group of us, collaborators and friends, got together, including Roberto Zurbano, who is sit here with us today, and to think together about how we wanted to evolve our work.
Me gustaría explicar más directamente nuestra metodología para compartirla y luego vamos a ver algunas fotos de lo que hacemos, ¿sí?
I'd like to share with you some of our methodology and also share some photos that illustrate our work.
Bueno, nuestra premisa de trabajo es conocer, actuar, transformar.
Our fundamental commitment of our work is to, to know, to act, and transform.
Tenemos como esa apertura a los conocimientos y a los puntos de vista que tenemos en colectivo.
and to find these unity points which help us to work as a collective.
Desarrollamos estrategias de diálogo, negociación y de acción, reflexión.
We create spaces for dialogue, but also for reflection.
Utilizamos metodologías participativas como la educación popular,
We
pero también
use-
las técnicas participativas o de búsqueda de consenso que nos ofrece la plataforma del hip hop, que es donde nosotros nos plantamos, ¿verdad?
We use participatory methodologies and popular education methodologies, but it's also important to tell you that we work through hip-hop culture, which is one of our main languages.
Es nuestra plataforma, el hip
It's
hop.
our platform. Our platform is hip-hop.
Por tanto, la música también es parte de esa plataforma.
So music is also part of that platform.
Nosotros consideramos algunos elementos básicos para poder desarrollar esta metodología. La primera es la proximidad.
We have a number of sort of principles or commitments that guide our work. One is proximity or closeness.
Es decir, el trabajo de persona a persona, conocer quiénes son, quiénes somos. Yo creo que se hizo un ejercicio práctico aquí.
Working face to face, close together with people. I think the exercise that you all did was a wonderful example of that.
Los códigos y los intereses donde nosotros nos vamos a mover a trabajar es importante también.
That we also need to be respectful of she's saying the word codes, like the codes that people use, the way that people work in local culture with the folks that we are going to be working with.
El segundo es el conocimiento.
And the second is knowledge.
Hacemos un proceso básico de lo que queremos cambiar, ¿no?
We have a process together of what is it that we want to change.
Y contamos con las potencialidades de todas las personas que participan para ese cambio que queremos ver.
And we include and count on the strengths of every single person that's working with us to make that happen or help that happen.
El tercero es la mediación.
The third is facilitation.
Identificamos los actores más importantes dentro del círculo donde vamos a trabajar.
We identify some of the social actors, the key social actors in the place that we'll be working.
Y entonces ahí vamos buscando cómo los niveles de compatibilidad que tenemos con cada uno de ellos, ¿no?
And we sort of consciously think about the compatibilities, the principal compatibilities that we have with them.
Ahí establecemos alianzas, pero también nos articulamos con otros proyectos, personas, organizaciones que sean afines a nuestros propósitos.
We build alliances, but we also try to build like links with all of the social actors that have similar vision and purpose with
El
us.
próximo es la formación,
Fourth is training.
el continuo trabajo de aprendizaje y reflexión.
And the constant process of learning and reflection.
La comunicación es el próximo elemento que tenemos en cuenta.
The next element is communication.
Ahí, bueno, buscamos las maneras de conectarnos, conocemos las inquietudes que tienen las personas, pero también usamos muchos de nuestros recursos que tienen que ver con la música, tienen que ver con los pullovers, tienen que ver con muchas cosas que nos sirven para comunicarnos.
The communication that we're using both our strengths in communication, but also counting on other people.
Ok. Y la conciencia es el otro punto que nosotros vamos desarrollando. Ayer el profesor Zurbano decía lo importante que es mantenerse consciente, ¿verdad?
So our next important point is conscience or consciousness.
Y eso requiere de que todos los días nos estemos revisando.
And Professor Zurbano was talking about the importance of that yesterday. And that part of that means for us every day we're questioning ourselves or
No me gustaría irme sin, ¿cómo se llama? Enseñarles las fotos que tenemos de los programas que hacemos. Tenemos 2 minutos, así que vamos a pasarlo rápidamente y nos va a ayudar.
I don't want to leave without showing you photographs of our work. So we will pass them quickly.
Aquí tenemos el trabajo con los niños y niñas.
Images of our work with children and
Ese es
youth.
nuestro logo.
This is our logo.
Aquí tenemos programas de agradecimiento a personas que han contribuido durante muchos años al desarrollo de la cultura negra, al desarrollo de la historia negra, a la autoestima nuestra.
Here we have a series of ceremonies where we thank our elders who have laid the foundation for recognizing and documenting and celebrating Black history and Black culture.
Aquí tenemos un aula de saberes donde contamos la historia que no nos cuentan en la escuela. Esa historia la vamos contando de manera alternativa. Y entonces una herramienta donde ponemos en el centro lo que sabemos todos. Y ahí construimos un conocimiento común, colectivo.
This is our classroom, aula de saberes, like many ways of knowing where we share knowledge that we have, but we're not talking about in schools.
Aquí tenemos nuestro primer evento de muñecas negras, porque en Cuba no se venden muñecas negras. Y eso es muy importante para la autoestima, para la niña o el niño, para su identidad, para ir fortaleciendo su identidad. Y a nosotros nos pareció importante tener una exposición de muñecas negras donde se pudiera exhibir y la gente se pudiera conectar con lo que estábamos diciendo.
Here are photos from a series of workshops we do on Black dolls. Because you can't buy Black dolls in Cuba, we have been organizing and training a series of workshops that celebrate the importance of Black dolls, the necessity of Black dolls for healthy self-esteem for Afro-Cuban children, and teaching about doll making. And exposition, she said, then they do exhibits.
Sí, ahí estamos con el evento de muñecas negras. Las personas que quieran colaborar con nuestro proyecto con muñecas negras, que quieran verla en su exposición, nos las pueden dar.
She's also extending the invitation to any of you that are working with Black dolls or related topics that want to attend one of their events.
Aquí tenemos el Club del Espendrú, pero haciendo su evento de los pelos.
This is Club del Espendrú, another workshop that we do on natural hair, African hair.
Y convocando a las muñequeras de nuestro alrededor para que hagan muñecas más acorde a las muñecas que se parecen más a nosotros, las personas negras. Entonces ahí estamos también con las niñas y niños haciendo nuestras propias muñecas.
And here we are in one of our Black doll workshops where we really have been working with people to make dolls that also look the way we look. And you see it's children that we're working with here to make.
Y luego estamos hablando de pelos.
Dolls.
Estamos hablando de pelos, estamos hablando de identidad.
Here we're talking about hair and the importance of hair for our identity.
El pelo como un elemento estético, me queda un minuto, como un elemento estético, pero también como un elemento de identidad que nos define dentro de una sociedad, digamos, racista.
And hair both as an important source of creativity and expression, but also as an important resistance against all the racist messages that we've gotten in a racist culture about African hair.
Así que allí tenemos también las niñas, los niños participando, los padres peinando a las niñas para también un poco romper eso de que ellos no se peinan.
We had one even with fathers, teaching fathers to braid their daughters' hair, breaking the stereotypes that men don't know how to do that.
Ahí están las caras preciosas también de esas mujeres, mujeres orgullosas de quiénes son y cómo son.
Here are all the beautiful faces of the proud women that we work with and talking about who we are.
Ahí tenemos también a Zurbano en su Habana Invisible, como habló ayer.
Here is Roberto Zurbano above on the left, taking one of his walking tours through the invisible Havana that he was explaining yesterday.
En fin, tenemos como muchas fotos que también nos permiten a nosotros reconocer qué es lo que tenemos, lo que se ha hecho hasta ahora, lo que tenemos como personas negras, esa contribución cultural que tenemos y qué es lo que nos falta. Lo que nos falta, como estamos trabajando desde la base de la cultura hip hop y usamos esa plataforma, pues nosotros lo vamos buscando porque cada uno de nosotros tiene un saber que puede complementar eso que nos falta y no necesitamos muchas veces de que alguien venga y lo diga. Nosotros podemos decirlo, nosotros podemos seguir pasando el mensaje. Esa es la manera en que lo hacemos.
So you see in the photos some of the work that we're doing as Afro-Cubans to celebrate our role in Cuban history and Cuban culture and to proactively make things happen. And again, all of this main element through the culture of hip-hop.
Gracias.
Thank you.
That was your moment for reflection. All right, so we're gonna give you a choice, a decision. We're gonna move into 4 groups, one focused on each of the curricula, and we'll have around half an hour to talk more in depth and lead you through some of that work. So, movement generation folks are going to be in this corner where Sammy is waving her hands, their hands. And blueprint for belonging, we will be in the back right there. Jody, do you want it on the back left? Teaching for Black Lives will be in the back left area. Right over there. And right here, Mahia will hold her group. And please try to sit together, and if you're staying here, kind of come towards the front. So movement generation will be over here if you're facing the front. To the right, Teaching for Black Lives will be towards the back on the right if you're facing the front.
Okay.
Blueprint for Belonging will be in the back on the left by the coffee. And up at the front will be El Club de Esperando. Espendru.